And we all know a lot more about OnlyFans now, don't we? One thing you can say for sure is probably not the best place to find your first girlfriend. And I don't need to make light of it because this is sad. You know, this is not, again, as I said, the way to get your first girlfriend. But as I said at the beginning when I first saw you guys, this case is really about intent. There's really no question that Mauricio went into the house. No question. Also, no question that Rachel News's mother had no idea that any of this was going on. In fact, you probably all saw Rachel News's mother get the bad news that her daughter was having sex with Mauricio outside the front door right before this happened. It was first she heard of it was in front of you folks, which is really too bad. She had no idea what was going on. But she was the only one that did, because Rachel certainly was involved with this right to the end. And the thing is, Mauricio's intent, and this is what's going to drive this, Mauricio's intent, his conscious object, his specific intent is to commit two crimes of crimes, either theft or invasion of privacy. So really what this comes down to is what his intent is. And actually listening to all this, and honestly, Attorney Garage does something very interesting. He at one point said, "Do you even know what you're doing there?" And that's a good question. Probably not. And that's the gist of this case. You know, this isn't a burglary that's going to commit a crime of theft. This is not your traditional economic burglary. And you know that because of the way he behaves when he gets in there. You know, the possibilities of what his intent might be. We'll see. It could be retrieving his fireplace or his TV set. It could be retrieving his glasses, his belt, his beanie. It could be these graham crackers. Probably not. The most likely reason he's in there is almost like he's moved in there. I mean, think about this. He's got set up in the attic. You know, he's got food, got a place to go to the bathroom. He's even made himself a key. Now, isn't that the darndest thing? Who's heard of a burglar? Goes in, makes himself a key, comes and goes throughout the day 5 times. You know, and this is the gist of this case. This is a very confused young man, completely confused. And you know, you can see him as he's testifying. He's not really, I don't want to be unkind, doesn't appear to be the most intelligent man. But he's young, hard to say really, because of his age, it's hard to tell what's going on. He's young, he's inexperienced, he's insecure. And when you think about the way he talks about himself, you know, he starts out when he talks to one of us, hard to say where, who. Well, you know, I'm online with OnlyFans. I mean, this woman because I don't really get out much. I'm not very good looking. I'm not very interesting. No one really wants to be with me. He found someone who wanted to be with him. But what he didn't know was that it wasn't really his girlfriend. What he didn't know is he was a customer. You know, this is the thing that eluded him. This is why there's a tragedy here. He didn't really get that he was a customer. He thinks he's in love. Well, and she tells him. She tells him, well, yes, I love you. Absolutely, you know, I love you. I want to engage with you. But, you know, the fact is, she's selling content. That's her job. And I'm not disparaging it. Everyone needs a job. Perfectly legal what she's doing. The problem is, she manipulates him. And creates, and remember, her job description basically is fantasy. You know, however it might be, whatever the client may be interested in, that's what she tries to accommodate. That's what she tries to pander to. Because let's face it, if you're a content provider, you're in the business of selling your content, it behooves you to get the idea of what the client wants, the customer wants, and to cater to that, to pander to it. And this is the problem in this case, is that he doesn't understand that this is a game. He thinks the fantasy is something that she shares and enjoys with him. It does not. This is all made up and contrived in her demeanor, in her presentation to Mauricio. Okay? It's all a big fantasy. She knows it, he doesn't. She knows that he doesn't get it, but she works him. She works him like a pro. She works him, and she keeps the money coming. She keeps the gifts coming, and she, frankly, keeps him interested, keeps him involved. The relationship is bizarre, it's fantastic, it's toxic. There's a real disparity between the position of control and power in this relationship. She's completely in control. She's older than he is, much more sophisticated than he is. Just look at what she does for a living. She's used to dealing with people and their fantasies. He's 20 years old. He's young. He's immature. He's insecure, to say the least. His self-esteem, frankly, is less than zero. In fact, you see, he does a lot of groveling when she threatens to leave him and not be with him anymore. Sometimes he even begs. Other times, however, he says, I've had it. And he tries to break away from her. More than once, he says, they would block each other and then unblock each other. She knows what she's doing. All you have to do is block somebody and continue to stay blocked. But yet, somehow, miraculously, she unblocks it. Now, when he does it and cuts off communication, she attempts to get around that by phone calls, by FaceTimes, things like that. And when that doesn't work, she calls her friends to facilitate her being able to reconnect with Mauricio. So even though at some point he has the wherewithal to say, this is something's wrong with this. This isn't for me. I don't want to pursue this relationship. It's not. Maybe the light bulb's going off in his head at one point, saying, "Wait a minute. Does she really love me when she says that? She tells me she loves me. Is that true, or am I just a customer?" Hard to say what's going through his head. What you know is he tries. She won't have it. She won't have it because this is her business. And he's her customer. And he's good for some money. And he's good for money down the road. It's not. The money train didn't show any signs of slowing up, and that's frankly, what she's into. She has all the power in the relationship, and she calls the shots. The fantasy business about stalking and things like that, you can't make this kind of stuff up. You really can't. Had there be if it was just Mauricio up there saying, well, yeah, she wanted me to stalk her, you'd wonder, well, you got to be out of your mind. Who wants to be stalked? She hadn't said it. We would all have a different case here. The funny thing is, as I told you before, there's largely an agreement about what happened. The question is, what does it mean? Largely everyone's in agreement. Some of and a lot of it came out on the witness stand when I was speaking to Rachel and things that she said to him during this interview that she gave. One of the quotes I want to do directly from her is she messed with his head. She says that. She wants to have him obsessed with her. She says that too. She wants him to behave like that. She wants him to follow her. She says these things. She admitted it. And the thing is, she probably didn't really want that. She was just telling him that. Because that's what she does. That's her job. That's her job. She strung him along. There's another quote I'd like to throw out there. She led him on. And probably the biggest problem with all this is she keeps telling him that she loves him. That's the biggest and probably the unkindest thing about this. There's a relationship here, there's no question about it, but it's not love. The tragedy is that she knows it, he does not. She knows it, he does not. He was deceived and he couldn't form the intent that the state thinks you should find him guilty of. He can't form the intent because he didn't have the facts. He didn't have the facts. He didn't realize this wasn't wanted. She was telling him it was. He's ready to believe it because this is all he has. He has no other relationship. This is his first one. He's ready to believe her when she tells him that. The difference between a trespass and a burglary, folks, is really intent. The question is, what was his intent when he goes in that house? You can look at a number of different things. I suggest you look at everything. Like I said, he talks about going in to get his glasses, stuff like that, the TV set, stuff like that. The fact is, Tate's absolutely right. He really doesn't make any effort whatsoever. And that's because his intent really is to live there and stay there and be close to the object of his desire. He wants to be with her. And it's comforting to him that she's right downstairs. He's in and out of that. It's almost like he's sold himself that this is a relationship and he's a roommate. He makes himself a key. He's not charged with doing that, but that's really what this is about. He wants access to Rachel. Okay? You know, could have been charged as you know, entered with the purpose of the crime of stalking. The fact is, she's told him that she wishes to be stalked. This is part of a game that they play. In order to find him guilty of burglary, you have to find his conscious object, his specific intent is to commit the crime of theft or to commit the crime of evasion of privacy. Trespass is a little bit different. Trespass, in order for him to be convicted of trespass, he has to be aware that he's not supposed to be there. That is more of a fit because, as I said to you folks before, Rachel's mother wasn't in on it. You know, Rachel was, not her mom. What's interesting about this case is Rachel told him before that if you don't get out of here, we call the cops. She said that more than once. She said that on the evening that Mauricio encountered the police fighter. Remember, she actually texted him. Now, this is a woman who says, I'm terrified, 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 but the fact is, she says in a text message, are you here? If you're here, you get out of here, or I'm gonna call the cops. I know you're here, I know you're here. She's not spending time on 911 saying, help me, help me, help me. She's saying, get out of here. She's saying, get out of here. And if he had, he may not be here, because this is a cycle with her. She says, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. And if he had gotten out of here, it was on his way back to Pennsylvania, you know, odds are that the next text he would have gotten was, you know, I've changed my mind, I love you, I want you to come back. Because he does that. You know, Attorney Guerrero talks about, well, all this stuff, you know, it's not in writing. You know, it's a stalking game, it's not in writing. Actually, it is. There are some things that aren't right. Remember, when he's there in December, and she finds him there, and she yells at him and says, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. On the way back, she writes to him saying, oh, you know, I didn't mean, I miss you, I do want to see you. I wish you were here. I love you. The next day, she says, you know, I don't want you to ever come up here unannounced again, but it was a little hot. It was a little hot. That's a difficult thing to reconcile with, yeah, she's a victim of stalking. She cultivated the stalking story. This is part of the fantasy that they were playing together. And again, like I said, the problem is he doesn't know it. This is something she's contrived. He doesn't know that he's actually a customer. But again, you know, Rachel's mother wasn't in on it. You know, Rachel Nunez lies repeatedly. You know, Mauricio isn't truthful with the police either. You know, and that's not entirely a shock. Here's this, you know, young man who really doesn't have a lot of experience with anything. He's 20, first girlfriend, and all of a sudden he's in an interview room with all kinds of police. Well, he didn't want to say, well, my girlfriend wants me to stalk her. What a shock! You know, that he didn't want to tell the police that. Some things were absolutely true. He had stuff there. Well, that could be it. I could be there to get my stuff. The last thing, bless you, the last thing he wants to do is tell these big guys yeah, well, you know, I'm meeting my girlfriend on OnlyFans, and I'm engaged in this weird stuff. Now, that didn't come up when he was talking to me, even though that's what it's about. It's not about TV sets. It's not about fireplaces. It's not about graham crackers. You know, it's about this fixation he has with her that she's invited. It's not just, you know, if you want to talk about who's lying to who, you know that, frankly, she's concealing this with possibly the end of, well, you know, maybe he'll go away and I won't have to talk to him or do him anymore. Because the first thing she does on this evening is lie to the dispatcher, and this is what she does. You know, after she gives him a chance, you know, get out of there, because, you know, she's texting him saying, look, you know, you gotta get out of here, I'm gonna call the cops, I'm not kidding. Then, and only then, she goes into her mother's room and says, you know, I think I saw somebody. Now, she knows who it is, she's talking to him. She saw him, she knows who it is. She didn't tell mom that. She said, well, I think I saw somebody, you know, it might be a problem. So, you know, mom listens and says, well, that might be a raccoon. So Rachel decides she's the one who's going to call the police. By the way, we listened to the 911 tape. She's not scared even slightly. And what she doesn't say to the 911 operator, I know who it is, I know what he's doing, I know where he lives, I know his name. None of that. She says, yeah, I think it might be upstairs, it might be a raccoon. You know, she knows full well it's not a raccoon. The next thing she does is lie to Sergeant LaFave. Very next thing, Sergeant LaFave is there. One of the protocols, as you heard from Sergeant LaFave, one of the protocols is, well, we have to screen out a domestic violence potential. I asked her if there was a physical relationship, because that would make a domestic violence issue. That's her job. That's what Sergeant Lefebvre is supposed to do. And what does Rachel Nunez say? Physical relationship? Nope. That didn't happen. Flat lie, flat out lie. She lies to her mother. She doesn't tell her mother. I didn't tell you this, Mom, but just 5 or 6 hours ago, we were having sex in his truck. Must have forgot to tell her mother. She fined her mother. I told her about it. I wish I didn't have to. That's when she finds out. Mauricio is being unforthcoming with the police because he's embarrassed. She's she's flat out lying to everybody to conceal the level of her involvement with him, to conceal it. So she doesn't have to admit that. She's like, as she told you, as she told the interviewer, that she led him on, that she told him that she wanted him to behave and follow her like that she wants him to be obsessed with her, that she strung along, led him on, all these things. She doesn't want to tell anybody this. Not surprising. It's not pretty. But that's what her motive is. Her motive is to get out of this as quickly as possible. The reason he's being less than forthcoming is that, he's embarrassed. And think about that for a second. That makes sense, doesn't it? When you think about this, this is the love of his life, his first girlfriend. And he's going to tell these police officers that, yeah, we've been on OnlyFans, and we have sex once, twice now, and that's nothing that he's anxious to tell them. And he has reason to be there beyond the stalking game, beyond the game itself. I think the line of the trial was when Attorney Garrod was cross-examining Mauricio. She was trying, and the interesting thing about the direct cross is it was exactly the same. He takes a long time. He's sort of plodding, sort of pedantic, takes his time, loses his train of thought, starts to cry. He was the same way with Attorney Garrod that he was with me. That's how he is. That's what he does. So when this is going on, Attorney Garrod is trying to get him to say, well, what were you doing in there? And they were going, was it the fireplace? Was it the graham crackers? Was it the TV set? And at one point she says, and this is perfect, she says, you weren't thinking at all, were you? That's for sure. And he says, yes, not thinking at all, not even a little bit. He is moving in there. And one of the other telling points in this trial was when he says, well, I got some stuff and then I went up to my room. And you may remember, because it was a kind of shock. I actually said, did you say your room? It's an odd thing to say, but not when you think about it. Not when you think about it. He was looking at it in his room. In his confused, sad, sex-addled mind, he believes that she's his girlfriend and he wants to be close to her. That's his purpose. That's his conscious object, is to go back up to his room until it all blows over and he can be with Rachel again. That's what he meant. That was his object. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your attention. Has been a lot of fun listening to about the OnlyFans stuff, but I appreciate you've done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Garrod.
Defendant was a man obsessed. Sounds like you must agree on it. But it's also very clear from looking at the evidence. There's nothing less than an unhealthy obsession that will lead someone to drive 350 miles for 5 hours, to break into someone's house 4 times over the course of 3 days, sneaking in and out of their room, taking photos of their genitals, and urinating in a cup in the attic. And while the defendant can try to say that he thought in his mind that he and Rachel were together to give some sort of excuse, it was very clear, and it was very clear to him that that wasn't the case, that these feelings, whatever they were almost entirely one-sided. Yes, Rachel may have been saying things to lead you on, to make you think that they might have been in some sort of relationship, but the fact of the matter is that only one of them was sending gifts. Only one of them was leaving. Only one of them was driving to see the other one. The defendant didn't think that they were in a relationship, and he said as much to 2 different police officers who specifically asked him. He said, well, it was always this really kind of complicated, on again, off again thing. The defendant had a compulsion to be with Rachel Nunez. The extremes that he went to, like breaking in, stealing her underwear, prying open her windows, were not done because it was something that he thought that she wanted. They were done because he had to feed his obsession with her and satisfy this compulsion to be around her and to be around her things, to know more about her, because he wasn't going to let something like her own free will stop him from being in her life. And we know that these break-ins weren't some sort of game, stalking game that he keeps referring to. And we know that because in the hundreds of pages of text messages, it is never once referred to or mentioned. These break-ins were about the defendant trying to regain control over something that he could not control, and that was out of his control. And that becomes clear when you consider what is going on in this relationship at the times that he's breaking into the house. On both January 20th and February 7th, the defendant broke into Rachel's home at a time when she had broken off contact with him. So let's look at those. We want to take that first break in January 20th, which I asked him about. Remember, at that point he had come up to see Rachel 4 different times. He had come up on the 6th, 7th for an unannounced visit, and he was turned away without any sort of face-to-face. He came up on December 12th, another unannounced visit, this time because he was concerned that she was going out to drink with her friends. Once again, he's turned away with no sort of face-to-face. On December 22nd, he comes up. They spend an hour and a half together and had sex. And then finally, on January 10th through the 13th, he comes up unannounced, and for 3 days, he makes efforts to try to see Rachel and get him to meet with her. And he leaves without getting any sort of face-to-face. And what do you have there? Well, we went through those text messages with the defendant. This fighting, this we need to be done. This is too much for me. I want this to be over. And you have a break in them speaking, where she says, I'm blocking you now. And after he's turned away, after trying for 3 days to have any sort of contact with her, what is he doing 2 days after that, while they're not talking? He's looking at burglary tools. He is looking at burglary tools because he's already planning to break into her house because she's cut off contact with him. On January 19th, she reaches out to him because she's concerned that he killed himself, but then says, now that I know you're okay, I'm going to block you again. We can't be doing this. And he says, okay, goodbye. After he says that, what does he do? He drives up to Somersworth and breaks in her back barn and comes and looks through her belongings. He does this because she had cut off contact with him and he was upset, and he needed to feed his obsession to be close to her and to be close to her things. And this is sort of reflected in the nature of that burglary. Because he doesn't go in the house on that occasion and start stealing her underwear or things like that, which he does later on. But he rifles through her childhood memories. And he does this in an effort to feel closer to her. Very odd thing to do, right? What guy cares about poetry that a girl wrote when she was in 6th grade? Well, somebody that's clearly very obsessed with her, that needs to get whatever he can. And that's what he's doing on that occasion. Going through her childhood memories, because he is so desperate to be with her, he will take literally anything he could get. And then you have the time frame leading up to the burglaries in February. Again, what is happening at that time? They're not speaking. The defendant even told you from February 1st to the 8th, they had stopped all sort of contact completely. He comes up on February 7th. On February 7th, he's breaking in at 3 or 4 a.m. and again, of course, in the evening. The first contact they have in 7 days is after he reaches out to her and says, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to text you, to which she immediately responds with requests to FaceTime her because she's worried that he's there. Again, in the context of this break-in, they are not together, they are not speaking, and he's upset about that, and he needs to do what he needs to do in order to feel closer to Rachel. And he comes equipped with a plan. Literally a list of ways that he can feel close to her, to be in her life, to know what she's doing, because again, if she's not going to tell him of his own free will, he's going to do it without and take things without her knowledge. Put a tracker on her car, put microphones and stuff to hear her. He wants to know exactly what she's doing, where she's going, and who she's talking to. And not just a list, he comes with tools. He had looked at lock-picking tools, and now he's bringing 2 different pry bars in order to break into her home. And you keep in mind, folks, that he had 5.5 hours on that trip up to think about what he is doing. This excuse that he didn't really know or wasn't thinking clearly, it's not true, because he had ample time to consider his plan and what he was going to do when he was there. And this time, when he gets there, he's not going to feed this obsession just by going through her school items or looking at her poetry. He's going to do things so that he can be physically close to her, being in the house, taking her items so that he can have a little piece of her when he goes back to Pennsylvania. He's going to put a tracker on her car so he can know her every move and try to access her phone so he can know what she's up to. And the minute that he gets to Somersworth, New Hampshire, everything he does from that point on is an effort to achieve those goals or to cover his tracks so that no one finds out what he's doing. And when you walk through what he did during that 3-day time frame, that becomes abundantly clear. First, he goes when it's dark out. He's there at 3 or 4 a.m. when he knows that he's got the best chances of not being seen. He pries open the windows, but he knows that that's not going to be a long-term plan. He can't keep prying open windows and obviously get caught. And so he develops a plan in order to get a key so that he can come and go and have unfettered access to Rachel's belongings as he pleases. So he waits, either in the attic or the unfinished part of the house. It's pretty unclear, but he is so desperate to get that key that he is waiting in her house until Victoria comes down and makes the keys available to him. He comes out of his little hidey hole, grabs them, waits a little bit longer, waits until they leave, then goes and starts taking photographs of their modem, and goes back out and makes a copy of that key. He waits until they're sleeping yet again, sneaks back in and puts the keys under the kitchen island. But on that occasion, he's not just there to replace the key. Again, he wants to be around her and get her items, and he's around her items and her for over 2 hours in her house, in her attic, in her bedroom. And what is he doing? Stealing her underwear, taking pictures from Victoria's room of Rachel. He creeps back out, and as soon as he's gone, he's plotting his return. He gets breakfast, and he returns to the house with a substantial amount of food, because this time when he goes back, he knows he could be there for a while, and he needs sustenance. So he waits until she's gone, he knows that she's left, goes back with his breakfast, and truly starts to treat the house as if it were his own. Wandering around, taking photographs of her bedroom, videos of the hallway, again, so that he can go back to Pennsylvania, and he can look back through this and feel closer to Rachel, and he can look at what her house looks like and imagine himself there. He takes, on that occasion, the red bathing suit from the bottom of her floor, you can see it in that picture, and leaves the food in the attic so that he can go back to it later. He goes and purchases the tile at 9:45 p.m. so that when he comes back, he can plant it on her belongings. But then something happens. After he leaves Target to purchase that tile at around 9:44, Rachel reaches out to him, and she texts him. And she's drunk, and he knows that she's drunk. And when Rachel's drunk, one thing he knows is that she's nice to him. So here's this interesting kind of twist to his plans. Planned on breaking into her house, but now he's here, and now Rachel might be interested in seeing him. So he has a decision to make. Does he tell her at that point that he's here and forego the burglary, or does he continue on with his plan? It's simply too tempting, he can't help it, and he tells her, for a couple hours, what would you do if I were here? She agrees, and he sees her, but they only see each other for 30 minutes, and then she sends him on his way, yet again. He doesn't get to have sex with her, and afterwards, she kind of does this 180. You'll see, you saw in the messages, where she starts to get mad at him, say, don't ever come here again. I don't know what gives you the right to think you can come to my mother's house. And here he is, back again where he started, with Rachel mad at him, and this compulsion, this need to be around her and see her. So he does the same thing he does the other 2 times that Rachel's not speaking to him, when things aren't going his way, and he breaks in. He's got his key copy, but now he still needs to get into her phone, finish that part of the plan. He knows Rachel's drunk, he knows she's probably not going to wake up, but he calls her just for good measure to make sure that even that sound of her phone going off isn't going to do that. He waits for her to be asleep, and again, he breaks in. He covers the tile in tape so that it can't be detected, and he tries to figure out how to get her phone. He told you, that the phone, which was in her bedroom, he picked up and was trying and attempting to unlock for a series of incorrect passcodes. He Googles, "Can a drunk person tell you something if you convince them?" And then some other guy starts calling her, and he's so possessive and obsessed that thinks he has the right to know who this person is that he calls this number from a blocked number and takes note not only of the number but of the individual, the guy, so he can keep track of the information. He's wandering around her house for over 2 hours, and halfway through takes a picture and photograph of her vagina. And to try to pretend that he did all of these things because it was something that Rachel wanted is truly preposterous. First and foremost, when he is arrested, he mentions nothing about that to Officer Lefebvre, about this being some kind of consensual thing. He says that she had invited him over earlier, but then actively tries to delete messages in front of Officer Lefebvre, likely the ones where Rachel's saying, "Don't ever come here again." And the idea that she would want this or somehow be happy that it was happening follows the logic that she would have eventually had to know, and the defendant is actively trying to cover up his steps to make sure she does not find out. And the reason he's doing that is because he wants to keep spying on Rachel, going in and out of her house, and not upsetting her, because he knows that doing this would upset her. Remember, he never told her about the January 20th burglary, and he was never intending to tell her about that or about the February burglaries, because he was not trying to make her happy. He was trying to feed his own interests. Keep in mind, when she's actively asking him in January 8th, "Hey, I just want to make sure you're not here because my door looks weird, and I wanted to make sure you didn't break in or something," he doesn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you liked that," or, "Well, doesn't that make you happy?" He actively lies and tries to pretend like he's in Pennsylvania saying things like, "I'm at work." And when he doesn't finally tell her that he is in town on February 8th, he never says anything of having arrived the day before. In fact, he says, "Don't be mad, but what would you do if I were here right now?" If this is something that he thought that she truly wanted, he would not have to preface that with, "Don't be mad." And his reaction when Rachel wakes up and sees him is not to stay and say, "Hey, aren't you happy I'm here? I'm playing that sexual stalker game that you wanted." It's to run up the stairs, into the attic, cut a hole in the screen, and go out to the window, and go out onto the roof in his bare socks. The defendant knew what he was doing was unwanted, and that it was wrong, which is why he lied to the officers about why he broke in, and why he's continued to lie to them when confronted with facts that directly refute his story. We also know that he knew that this was wrong because he apologized for it. He wrote a lengthy apology note to Rachel where he never once says, "I thought this was something that you would like." It was, "I don't know why I did this. I am so stupid." And goes on to say that this was a scary thing for you, and I know that you'll hate me. And he tells Detective Sunderland in the clearest of terms, when asked, "Did she ever tell you to come in? And did she ever tell you to break in?" He says no. Nothing about this defense makes sense. Nothing about it fits with the actual facts of the case. And the only one that's actually saying it is the defendant, who has lied about everything in order to minimize his own culpability. What he's doing is twisting and capitalizing on something that Rachel said in passing and asking you to take it in the most literal sense, because doing so benefits him and is the only way he can counter all of the overwhelming evidence that he broke into her house without her knowledge. And what was it that she said? "I like that you're so obsessed with me, and how come you're not obsessed with me anymore?" That is hyperbole. If you're feeling frustrated and you say to a friend, "Just kill me now," it does not give that friend permission to kill you. And when she said these things, "I like that you're obsessed with me," or "Why aren't you so obsessed with me anymore?" keep in mind, all she knew is that this was a guy that was sending her gifts, sending her money, sending her son gifts, and showering her with compliments and admiration. She had no idea that he was breaking in and out of her home. For someone who had bad experiences with men and incredibly low self-esteem, that kind of behavior, the gifts, the admiration, it probably felt very nice. And that's, when she says it, what she's looking for. More of that. She is not looking for the defendant to break into her attic, to come down, take videos of her vagina, and to creep back up and pee in her attic. She did not ask for that. She didn't want that. No woman would want that. And the defendant knew it. He didn't act obsessed with her because she gave him the idea or thought that she wanted it. He was already obsessed with her, and she did not know what he was capable of when she made those remarks. Another thing the defense is hoping to capitalize on is that he can either get you to not like Rachel or feel upset by the way that she treated him, so much so that you ignore this glaring evidence of guilt. Now, Rachel is not the perfect victim, certainly, and I'm not here to make excuses for the things that she did or try to get you to like her, because the thing is, you do not have to like her. The law protects everyone, even the people we don't like. And leading him on, going back and forth on him, texting toxic or maybe even crazy messages at times does not give the defendant the right to break into her house and hide in her attic. What she did was not a crime. What the defendant did was. Keep in mind, there are also 2 other people living in this house, Victoria, the homeowner, and a toddler, Weston, and they certainly did not deserve to not feel safe in their home. Now, I want to talk for a minute about the charges in this case. The defendant is charged with criminal trespass for breaking in on January 20th, which we know because he takes, again, that photo of the poem at 3 a.m., and he also has a video of him attempting to get through the window. And the only way he could have taken a photo of that poem is to be physically present in the barn at that time. Now, that break-in is distinguishable from the others in February in that we have no evidence that once he was in that house, he was committing any sort of crime. And that's the difference between criminal trespass and burglary. Now, the rest of the charges, the ones from February, those are all burglaries. And it's a lot of in and out, in and out, in and out. And I want to kind of clarify that with you guys because I know the dates and the times can be a little bit confusing. So burglary, as the judge will read to you, is entering unlawfully or remaining unlawfully in a home with the purpose to commit a crime. The crime in these charges alleges either violation of privacy or theft. You do not have to be unanimous on which of those crimes he intended to commit. Only that at some point he develops the intent to commit one. We also do not have to prove that the crimes were ultimately completed. Now, theft is a little self-explanatory, but violation of privacy you might not be as familiar with, and there are a few different legal variations of that, so I'm just going to go through a few of them. And the judge will also do this. But violation of privacy can be using a device to photograph or record or transmit images or sounds in a private place without consent. It can also be using a device to photograph or record a person's private body parts under their clothing without their consent. Or it can be for the purpose of arousing or gratifying sexual desire, viewing another person without their knowledge and consent. So, for the initial entry, on February 7th, that's when he goes in initially to steal keys. So for that burglary, he has either the intent to steal keys, but he's also photographing a modem. So that would be a violation of privacy for that initial entry, which of course we know he confesses to and was found in his home. For the evening burglary, that is when he comes back, re-enters, takes the key, returns the key, and at that point taking underwear from the hallway. So that's theft. On February 8th through the 9th, 2 burglaries from that day. The first is after he returns from McDonald's and he's upstairs videoing the upstairs hallway. That's a violation of privacy. Steals a bathing suit, a theft, and in the evening, when he returns, takes and views a video of her vagina, violation of privacy. Steals graham crackers and stuff. So those are the 4 burglary charges. Now the defense wants you to really double down on this intent issue. What was his intent when he was in the home? In order to prove a burglary, we have to prove that he either entered the home with the intent to commit a crime, or while he remained there unlawfully, formed an intent and remained there in order to commit a crime. So if he's there for some sort of unlawful reason, but he has no intent to commit a crime, he is still guilty of burglary if at some point during his entry, some point during the time he's there, he decides to commit a crime and stays there in order to do so. And we know he did this because he's there for a prolonged period of time and he's committing several crimes, several thefts and violations of privacy. Now, defense wants you to hold him accountable for criminal trespass, and that's for a reason. It's a less serious crime. But the defendant did some incredibly egregious things when he broke into Rachel's home. And he needs to be held accountable, and it's your job to hold him accountable for the crime that he actually committed, and not some watered-down version of it. I said in my opening that the defendant went from being attracted to infatuated and to obsessed with Rachel. It is what happened. It is demonstrated in his escalating behavior, where over the course of 3 months, he goes from sending expensive gifts to driving long distances, to breaking in and filming her, and stealing her belongings. He's getting more and more frustrated by the fact that his relationship isn't working out with Rachel, and this is his solution to feeding that obsession. These break-ins were not some sort of consensual thing, but were done at times when Rachel was blowing him off and he was feeling desperate. Rachel leading him on may have not helped to prevent what happened, but it is certainly not an excuse, and it's certainly not a defense. What she did, whatever she did not deserve what happened to her, and her mother and son especially did not deserve what happened to them. The defendant needs to be held accountable for the crimes that he committed, and I ask you to find him guilty of 4 counts of burglary, 1 count of criminal trespass, and 2 counts of violation of privacy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.